We're talking Kayvon Thibodeaux on today's LockedOn Giants podcast. Spencer McLaughlin of the LockedOn Ducks podcast joins us to give us everything we need to know and then some about the Giants' first round draft pick. That's coming up next on the LockedOn Giants podcast.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily New York Giants podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, New York Giant fans, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast family, your team every day. Patricia Traina here with you, and as promised, we are bringing you our college experts all this week to talk about the Giants draft haul, and we are working our way through the first round. Yesterday, we talked about Evan Neal, and today we are going to talk about one Kayvon Thibodeaux. To speak with me about Kayvon Thibodeaux, or KT, I guess as he's known, is Spencer McLaughlin, and he is the host of LockedOn Ducks, and he also hosts Locked On Pac-12. Spencer, very happy to have you with us.
Hey, it is great to be on the show and talking to all the Giants fans out there who I hope get a couple of great players here in the first round when they look back on their careers, because it's been a rough go for the Giants fans as of late.
It sure has.
Yeah, a buddy of mine is a big Giants fan, and big Giants fan, and let's just say I am well aware of the difficulties of the New York Football Giants over the last couple of years, because we text quite often.
I bet. So you know all about our misery. But you know what?
Yes.
It's a new era of Giants football. People are really excited about, especially about the first round picks. Evan Neal, offensive tackle, who, again, I spoke about yesterday, and KT, who we're going to talk about today. I'm excited about this young man. Let's start off with an overview. I mean, very big personality. What's he really like, though? Is that big personality for show, or is that who he is?
It's a part of who he is. And, you know, ever since he got to Oregon, he showed that on the field. And then we started to see the, you know, off-field stuff, and that's not a negative connotation, right? Usually off-field is bad, but we started to see his personality kind of come into the fiber of who he is as a football player and as a person as his career went on at Oregon. And that's definitely the guy that the New York Giants are getting. And, you know, from a personality standpoint, I think it's a great fit. You know, the Giants, certainly from a player personnel standpoint, need Kayvon Thibodeaux. But I think New York is a place that he definitely wanted to go. And I think that matters. You know, we've seen numerous examples in the NFL over the last couple of decades, Eli Manning most notably, of if a guy doesn't want to go to a particular team, whether he makes that public or not, then he's not going to have the best chance for success. But I think when Kayvon Thibodeaux heard his name called at number 5 for the Giants, he was thrilled. And I think Giants fans were thrilled, and they should be. And, you know, for what it's worth, just my 2 cents, I like the Evan Neal pick as well. I think that he projected as one of the best offensive linemen in this class, and I think to get him at 7 reminded me of an Oregon Duck who was taken at 7 the year before, Penei Sewell, where, you know, he was the 7th pick, but very easily could have been taken somewhere in the top 5 because he was that talented of a player. But the other teams went in different directions. And so to get Thibodeaux at 5 and Evan Neal at 7, I think was good work by the Giants front office.
And of course, I don't think anybody was more excited than the young man who announced the pick, Sam Prince, a Make-A-Wish kid, who's an aspiring broadcaster, by the way, from what I understand. I haven't spoken or met the young man, but
good for him.
That was awesome, just to see the emotion, and then to see KT come out and kind of do the fancy handshake with Roger Goodell. It was hilarious. But, you know, let's backtrack a little bit, though, about his background here. You know, he came from Los Angeles. He spoke at the Combine about how he's always kind of been in the spotlight. How has he kind of adapted to that? Because, you know, look, the spotlight and fame can eat a person up alive if they don't have the right mindset. And I'm just wondering, you know, based on what you know about him, how has he kind of handled it? Is it, you know, does he have a quiet place he goes to? I mean, what does he do to kind of balance all this?
Well, I haven't been his roommate before, so I don't know if he has a quiet place necessarily that he goes to. But what I will say is a prospect who's going to the Big Apple and will have to deal with plenty of media attention and a lot of press will be covering him in a pretty harsh manner. I would expect, not necessarily a bad thing, but the expectations are high. Is the point that I'm trying to make here, and he's someone who embraces all of that. He has from the jump. When NIL came out, he was one of the biggest early proponents of capitalizing on his name, image, and likeness. And he's made copious media appearances and he's super comfortable on camera. And that's something that he recognizes as a part of the business of going to the NFL. So it's not something that's going to overwhelm him. Now, for the critics who will say he's too into that, just watch what he does on Sundays this year and in the coming years for the Giants. And then let me know if you still think that that's a problem. And if he ends up not being a good pick, you can come at me at Smalls_55. But I'm going to confidently say that he will be a productive player for the Giants defense. And so him having that sort of personality that's willing and ready to embrace it, in addition to his on-field talent and the potential that he has there for the Giants defense, I think is what makes him such a great pick for the Giants and a reason that New York football fans should be excited. And the Jets, that's a whole nother matter. And I thought they had a pretty good draft as well, but I really thought the Giants with those picks at 5 and 7 made the most of drafting twice inside the top 10.
Were you surprised that he was there at 5? I thought he would go a little bit higher, in all honesty. I mean, I know
So
there was talk about his,
yeah.
the attitude being off-putting, but it seems like, that was just, smoke.
Yeah. So first of all, Vegas is undefeated. They had his over under at draft selection at 5.5 was the final place. They are undefeated, and I just always am amazed at that sort of stuff. But I think him going at 5 is where I expected him to go before the draft a couple months ago. But then leading up to the draft, all the stuff comes out. He ended the combine early, and is his work ethic really that good? And does he really love football and all that sort of stuff? Which I think most of it was utter nonsense, frankly, and just a byproduct of people need stuff to talk about. They need content, and it was an easy route to go, right? Like I understand how you could put those points together and arrive at the conclusions that several did of like, oh, I don't know about his work ethic. I don't know about this, that, the other thing. And, frankly, if I were a host that hadn't watched it, every snap that he's ever taken in college, or someone who hasn't watched every game he's played or read stuff about him extensively, then I might have put those same points together. So I'm not going to fault the people who wrote those sorts of pieces or, expanded on said reports too harshly. But I will say that several months ago, January, February, I would have been shocked if he'd fallen to number 5. But I was a little surprised that he was taken at number 5 just because the pre-draft experts were saying that he might fall in the 7 to 10 range, which I thought would have been just bonkers. I mean, 5 is more along the lines of what I expected for him because, as someone who's seen him play every snap of his college career, I know what he's capable of, and he is a top 5 caliber pick. And so I think that it was definitely not a reach or anything of the sorts. I think if he had fallen in the 7 to 10 range, it would have been ridiculous value for whoever got him. But I think the Giants made a good selection at 5. And, that's about where I thought he would be because Aiden Hutchinson was really good. And Sauce Gardner, when you look at his stats in college, he was ridiculous. And even Nick Saban said, with their elite wide receiving core at Alabama, they were throwing away from Sauce Gardner. So there were a lot of other really good players in this draft. So not surprised. 5 is about where I would have thought he would be. And Vegas thought that too.
All right, let's now talk about KT's football abilities. Let's find out a little bit more. You've been saying you've seen every snap he's ever played. We've read these scouting reports, but as someone who has seen him, what does he really do well? What doesn't he do well just yet? And how do you think he could be best deployed in a defense?
Well, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but Wink Martindale is the Giants' defensive coordinator, correct?
Correct.
They hired him over after he departed from the Ravens. what Martindale loves to do, for those of you Giants fans who don't know this, he loves to blitz on third down. He is a big fan of cover zero pressure, meaning that he's going to put no safety in the middle of the field to help. He's not going to put two. He's not going to run a lot of zone. On 3rd and 7, he wants to blitz 6 or 7 guys, go man-to-man on the outside, make the quarterback make a read, and rely on one-on-one situations. I think that sets up really well for KT from a schematic standpoint, because what that will allow him to do is avoid the double teams that he ran into in college in a number of ways. And that was one of the concerns about him coming out was, well, did he have the most productive 2021 year? And the answer is, relative to his overall talent, no. But what you also have to consider there is Oregon's defensive line outside of Kayvon Thibodeaux was a real weakness over this past season. And when he was not on the field, there was no pass rush. There wasn't a limited pass rush. There was no pass rush. Go watch the Ohio State game if you don't believe me. If you can find a full recap or a full replay of it on YouTube somewhere, when Kayvon Thibodeaux wasn't there for that game, CJ Stroud had an hour to throw every pass because he wasn't on the field. I mean, this guy, from a talent standpoint, can be a game wrecker. And there were stretches where he was not as dominant as we, as Oregon fans, would have liked. I think part of that was scheme. We dropped him into coverage way more on third down than we should have. There's no reason for us to have ever dropped him into coverage on third down, which happened several times with Tim DeRuyter, who's no longer the Ducks defensive coordinator. And he did a lot of things that were okay, but overall, I wasn't thrilled with him as the DC. And so Thibodeaux is a guy who can drop out from the defensive end slot. He'll run with a linebacker or a tight end into the flat and make a play in space. He's that kind of an athlete. He's 6'5", 250 pounds, runs, I think, a 4.58 40-yard dash. I mean, his measurables are off the charts, so you don't have to worry about that. But from a schematic standpoint, one of the reasons his production wasn't as high as it could have been in 2021, why his draft stock fell a little because of it, part of it, I think, was scheme. Part of it was also that because he was so good, he drew so much attention from other teams. He drew double teams regularly. Not a tight end helps out or a running back chips him. I'm talking 2 offensive linemen shift over to block him, and the other guys were able to handle Oregon's players on the defensive front because they weren't particularly strong in pass rush situations all season long. So when you look at Thibodeaux, I think that those concerns are somewhat valid. He was also battling an ankle injury that caused him to miss that Ohio State game. And, he was in and out of the lineup, and he had to miss the first half of the Cal game because of this. I won't go into that Stanford game and the targeting call, yada, yada. But he came back in the second half. And if you watch that Cal game at Autzen Stadium from last year between Cal and the Ducks, the defense in the first half was completely different. Cal was converting third downs. Cal was able to run the ball. Cal was able to do a number of things offensively. Thibodeaux comes back in the second half. Everything is different. Everything was different. Garbers was under pressure constantly. Everything that Thibodeaux did in that game didn't show up in the box score. So he is a guy who just has that ability to take over games and dominate in one-on-one situations. When you read scouting reports, you'll see, and I think that this is certainly correct, he needs to work on his bend a little bit, his speed rush around the edge. He's capable of doing that and needs to develop an elite interior pass rush move as well to beat tackles to the inside. But if he's able to get the sort of coaching that Wink Martindale has shown he's capable of, and he's coached a lot of good players in Baltimore, I think that Kayvon Thibodeaux will be the sort of player that Giants fans expect.
Yeah, and I think they're going to automatically put him as a starter opposite of Azeez Ojulari.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
To finally give the Giants something they haven't had in a long time, and that is a Batman and Robin pass rushing duo.
Yes.
That they have not had since really Jason Pierre-Paul, who they drafted in 2010 in the first round. That's how long it's been.
It's been a little while. And that concept of having a Batman and Robin on your defensive front is crucial because of what I talked about a moment ago. There were plays in the UCLA game, another Kayvon Thibodeaux dominated performance for Oregon's defense, particularly at the end of the first half. You have to have someone who can draw the attention so you can't get double teamed. In that UCLA game, Kayvon Thibodeaux got triple teamed. There were literally multiple pass rushes where Oregon was only rushing 3 or 4, And by the end of the play, he had 3 offensive linemen struggling to keep him down. I mean, if you're going to look at that sort of stuff and say, well, why wasn't he producing? Gee, I don't know. I'm pretty sure 3 offensive linemen at the Power 5 level could block Myles Garrett. If you have 3, maybe not 2, but 3, yeah, I'll take their chances there.
All right, Giant fans, we have more coming up on today's Locked On Giants podcast. But first, Mother's Day is this Sunday. And, you can give mom something really special that she'll treasure forever with fine jewelry from BlueNile.com. Locked On Sports listeners get $50 off $500. And this podcast exclusive is only good through Mother's Day. So use code LOCKEDON. That's code LOCKEDON at BlueNile.com. Blue Nile offers a diverse selection of rings, bracelets, earrings, necklaces, all kinds of jewelry. So you're sure to find something special to celebrate that special event with that special someone in your life. Every order is insured, ships free, and arrives in discreet packaging that won't give away what's inside. So shop stress-free. Pick up your forever piece. Go to BlueNile.com and remember that promo code LOCKEDON to save $50 off your order of $500 or more. Now, I'm kind of curious, when KT came to the Giants for his introductory press conference, a lot of flash, a lot of swagger, but, just kind of sitting there and kind of, observing, I think deep down, and tell me if I'm wrong here, but deep down there's a young man who really wants to be great. Yeah, he talked about, my goal is to learn the playbook by training camp. My goal is to be great. My goal is to help this team win. I'm kind of wondering, because you look at the flash and the swagger that he brings, which kind of reminds me a little bit of a Ray Lewis, a little bit of a Lawrence Taylor. I'm actually that old, so I remember Lawrence Taylor back in the day. But, you're coming to New York, a big media market. You're a rookie. There's an established locker room, even though it's a new coaching staff. How do you think he's going to kind of make that adjustment? Because he's no longer the big man on campus anymore. He is going to have to earn his due. He's going to have to probably carry football shoulder pads after practice in the summer and do all the, the stuff that rookies do. So how do you see him kind of handling all that?
I just want to say I would pay $50 to see him with a pink backpack on, the way that guys in the major leagues do. I would love to see that. It's a valid question to ask about him, because, it's like when you go from high school to college. Your last year in high school, you're a senior, you're kind of running the school, you know how the show works, you're barely showing up to class. Then you go to college and boom, you're a freshman all over again. And that changes in just a couple of months. And so Thibodeaux will undergo that adjustment, but it's one that he's made before. He came to Oregon as the top ranked prospect. I've got to stop putting myself in word traps like that. I do it all the time on my show. I've got to knock that off. He came as the number 1 prospect in the class of 2019. And right away he started playing, but right away he wasn't the dominant force that he was by the end, but he kept getting better and better. And when he got to Oregon, he only had one pass rush move, and that was a speed rush around the edge, basically just using his physical traits. But just by the end of his freshman season, you can see him putting on a swim move to get through a double team to force an incompletion in the Rose Bowl against Wisconsin. And that's not a team that is exactly short on big, powerful offensive linemen. And he was dominant in that game. Did the same thing to Utah, by the way, who smacked Oregon twice this year in the 2019 Pac-12 championship game. Again, his true freshman season. He developed a lot over the course of that first campaign in Eugene. So I think when you look at the body of work that he put together and the potential that, he has to, or not the potential, I should say, but the task in front of him to do the same sort of thing, he has to apply those same sort of principles. He has to come in with a growth mindset. And I think he's more than capable of doing that. And I think despite what some people are going to say, that he doesn't have a work ethic and yada, 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 he's done it before. And I'm confident that he can do it again. And he's got all the measurables to be an elite player. And, like we were talking about earlier, he's going to New York. It's a big media market. There's a lot of attention. You have to know how to handle it, but he already handles it, right? Because he got a year of NIL exposure, and he knows how to carry himself on camera, and he knows who he is. And he has, a pretty big personality. You saw that when he walked on stage in that really awesome moment. That was kind of the highlight of the draft. And he's okay with that. He's not going to shy away from it. He's not seeking it out just for the sake of seeking it out. He seeks out those opportunities because that's just kind of who he is. And that's who he wants to be. And so I don't think it's going to be a problem. And I think Kayvon Thibodeaux in New York, I think there's a lot of superstar potential there.
Yeah, for sure. And it's been a while. I mean, you can make a case, I guess, for Saquon Barkley as being a superstar, but he doesn't have quite the personality and the swagger that of a Kayvon Thibodeaux. So
Yeah, I agree.
all right, let me ask you this now. Knowing what you know about him, what's the one thing that maybe is a concern for you with him coming to New York, whether it be something on the field, off the field, maybe both?
I think I would go on the field for that, because if people want to say, well, he's off the field, like, well, he's too into media, does he really love football? I don't know. I watched him on the field for 3 years at Oregon. He was our best defensive player by a landslide. He's one of the most dominant defensive players the Ducks have ever had, of which they have had several. Now, a lot of the best Oregon players have been on the offensive side of the ball, but they've had some great defensive ones. And he's the best defensive lineman Oregon has had since Haloti Ngata. And it's not particularly close. Nada was slightly better, but that guy was, oh my gosh, was he good. Speaking of Wink Martindale, by the way, he coached Haloti Ngata when he was in Baltimore, and now he gets Kayvon Thibodeaux. So maybe there's an Oregon connection there that will work out in Giants fans' favor. You just never know when those sorts of stories align. But the one thing on the field with Thibodeaux, I think, is the array of pass rush moves. And that was one of the biggest, I think, legitimate knocks coming out of the draft is he tends to rely a little bit on his physical traits. Now, he has elite physical traits, but when you get up to the NFL, all of the guys have really good physical traits. And he can struggle in the run game at times, but he's also got the potential to be a game wrecker there. I've seen him do both, where he's been turned in situations where he shouldn't have been turned around to create a running lane, but he's also blown up a play entirely and gotten into the backfield so fast that no one understands how he got there so quickly. His get off is one of his strongest attributes, maybe his single strongest attribute. So I think if he's able to get solid coaching in New York and they're able to help him develop an array of moves to get by a tackle, he's just going to be a nightmare in one-on-one situations, as he was throughout his entire collegiate career. And one other thing, I know you asked for one knock, but this is just kind of how I am. You asked for one, I've got five. It's like Peter Brand in Moneyball. It's like, I asked you to do 3 player evaluations. Yeah, well, I did 49. Actually, I did 52. I don't know why I lied. Anyway, so the other thing with him is that when you watch him and you say, boy, he's really, really good, but he's in the Pac-12. Yeah. He is, and that's a valid concern. I am as bullish as anybody that I know about the demise of the Pac-12, and it is not in a great state. I think most people kind of know that, but as a Pac-12 fan, I recognize it, and I want it to be better in that sense. But if you're concerned about that, go watch the 2020 Pac-12 championship game. I know the season was weird, and the Pac-12, I'm not even going to get into that. He was going up against Elijah Vera Tucker from USC, who was a first-round draft pick in the NFL, and he dominated the game. So if you're worried about that, that's the game that I would point you to, but he's just got the physical tools to be there, and he has shown on the field that he's worthy of the number 5 overall pick, and I think Giants fans are going to like what they get.
All right, Giant fans, we have more coming up on today's LockedOn Giants podcast. But first, BetOnline.net is the only place that offers the best information on the latest odds, contests, and player props for all your sports betting needs. No matter what sport you're into, BetOnline.net has you covered. Plus, they offer everything you need to know for live betting and your favorite Vegas casino games. Head on over to BetOnline.net today to learn more about the trends and the action. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, now, final question. We know what KT can do. All right, we've seen it on film. But coaches have this thing about, especially at the NFL level, when they get a young player in, they don't just want to settle for what they can do. They want to maybe help them expand, spread their wings a little bit. What is KT's ceiling? What hasn't he done much of, or what haven't we seen a lot of from him that you think is still there waiting to be tapped into a proverbial gold mine?
To play an entire season at full health, in this version of KT. So 2020 was a shortened season. 2021, he was not fully healthy. So if they can get him on the field and keep him healthy throughout the year, and then rush him as often as he should get after the passer in third down situations. And I don't have a problem every now and then, to confuse the defense and incorporate schemes and all that sort of stuff. You can drop him into coverage and he can cover, primarily just a flat zone. I wouldn't drop him in the middle of the field. It's not something that he's particularly comfortable with. But if you want to drop him out into the flat, have him run with a running back, a fullback, or a tight end who's on a check down, he can certainly do that. But what Giants fans should expect is that on third down, he is putting one hand into the ground and going after the passer. And he did that a lot while he was at Oregon. There were also times where I would throw up my arms, just absolutely bamboozled at the fact that it was third down and Thibodeaux was in coverage. Because if I were another team, the one thing that I would be looking for on a third down situation when I have to pass is, where is Kayvon Thibodeaux and how is he going to get after? And I was just not a fan of the number of times they dropped him into coverage. So I think that if you're a Giants fan, you should want to see him getting after the quarterback every chance that he gets, because that is where he's going to make the biggest impact, whether it's sacks, quarterback pressures, or hurries, collapsing the pocket, whatever it may be. He can do all of that. His get off, as I said, I think is his best ability. It is lightning quick. He's got great strength. He grew during his time over at Oregon in the weight room department. And so I just think that he's got everything that you need, but you got to just kind of let him loose. And it felt at times while he was with the Ducks that they were holding him back a little bit. I won't say a lot because he was still incredibly productive, but you just got to let him loose. Let him get after the passer, set him up schematically to be in a one-on-one with a tackle, and let him do the rest. And I think he'll become a starting player that Giants fans are happy with.
So he's played with his hand in the dirt, and also, I guess, has he been like a wide nine or?
Yeah,
or
he can stand up. It's definitely something that physically he's capable of doing. I think he's best when he can put his hand in the ground and use his get off like that. But if you want to stand him up and have him be kind of a contain on a running play, I mean, you can't throw a tight end at him. He's going to destroy him most likely. You got to get an offensive lineman or two guys out there to help contain him on the edge there. But I think that he's best when he can put one hand in the ground. 3rd and 7, quarterback's got to throw. I think that's where Thibodeaux is going to be able to shine the most.
Yeah, I'm I'm so excited because, it's funny. Harry Carson, the Hall of Fame linebacker, hasn't studied the film, but I read where he was reminded of a young Lawrence Taylor with that swagger and that attitude and that confidence, and comparing anybody to a Lawrence Taylor. I mean,
that's a big that's a big thing to do, because LT was as dominant a defensive player as the sport of football has literally ever seen. Some people say the most dominant ever, and it's hard to compare eras, so I'm not going to get into that space and such. But what I do know is that Thibodeaux can be a Pro Bowl caliber defensive end for the Giants, and on a roster that is in a complete and total rebuild, they need help in the trenches, and Thibodeaux is certainly a guy who can provide that. And I'm rooting for him as someone who saw him play for 3 years in college for my Ducks, and I always root for any guy who played for Oregon, even if it was just for a year. Sometimes I like seeing him succeed in the NFL. And with all the doubt and dispersion that was cast at Thibodeaux over the months leading up to the draft, and like, oh, is his work ethic there? Is he going to do this? If he starts to really knock it out of the park, I'll just warn anybody who might come across my show. I will be so obnoxious on there. I will be the most annoying person in the entire world. And that's just the way that it is. If it goes the other direction, you can come at me and I will take it. I'm a big boy. I can handle it. But just know that I've got those takes locked and loaded and ready to go for all the people that doubted him.
Oh my goodness. And by the way, LT, I don't know how old you are, but this is a
Not
guy
very.
who he forced up, coaches and offensive coordinators to come up with new ways to block him. Now, I'm not saying I don't know that KT is going to actually be on that level. Probably not because there's only one LT, and I'm not gonna diss LT because let's face it, he was like the greatest linebacker I think we've seen. I know that I've
Yeah,
seen in my lifetime, but I'm certainly excited what Thibodeaux brings to this Giants team.
you
I
should
think
be.
it's going to be something that they have been missing for a number of years. They've been trying to get that pass rush from outside the organization. It just hasn't worked. And you mentioned his get off, and having seen it, it reminds me of OC Umanura's get off. I don't know if you remember him.
Oh yeah,
He
oh
had a
yeah,
lightning quick step, first step there. I mean, a lot of times he was in the backfield before, just as the ball was getting snapped,
yeah,
and he just had a
yeah.
knack for timing it. So I'm curious to see if they maybe get creative with him. If they use Thibodeaux, maybe I don't know if they would use him inside. I know they used to do that with Justin Tuck.
He can rush inside. He did that several times while he was at Oregon. You know, that's one of the things that makes him an intriguing prospect that I've
Wow.
only touched on kind of lightly here because we've just been in other discussions, but he can play, he can do a lot of things. I've mentioned the pass coverage, but he rushed inside several times. And I think that that's an advantage because guards are not used to having to react to somebody who is that fast. So you can go watch that 2019 Pac-12 championship game against Utah. He gives a couple of guards the business rushing inside because here comes a guy who's standing up right over the top of him and he thinks he's just going to have to, bull rush him and be stronger. And Thibodeau's too fast and he goes right around him and forces an incompletion. So that's something that I think Wink Martindale, metaphorically speaking, has a new toy to play with because he can do a lot of things with Kayvon Thibodeaux. And I hope it's primarily getting after the passer, but I think you'll see him do a lot of things in his rookie season.
Oh, I can't wait to see how Wink Martindale is planning to deploy him.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like you said, it's going to be an aggressive defense, and that
Yeah, and if you're
defense.
if you're gonna blitz a lot, then you're gonna create a lot of one-on-ones, and that'll be a new thing for Thibodeau.
Sure.
That'll probably be a welcome sight, even if he's now going up against NFL talent every week because he's made it to the league. He will probably just see one guy, just the one. I'm used to two. Where's the chipping halfback? Where's the
Yeah.
tight end? I mean, I'm used to all sorts of stuff out here. You tell me all I got to do is get past that guy. Like, I think that's gonna send a green light on his head. Like, oh, it's go time, baby. Let's roll.
Yeah, and he brings, like I said, that swagger that's been really missing since, gosh, you'd have to go back to the 2011 team, the Super
Yeah,
Bowl championship team that had that swagger on the defense with
yeah, with
Antrell Roll and
JPP.
those guys, and JPP, exactly. They haven't really had that lately. They've tried to manufacture it, but it's just been so difficult. And I just feel like it's a new era of Giants football, right? I know it's May, it's early May, but I'm excited about this draft class. I'm excited about Thibodeau and what he brings. I can't wait to see how they deploy him. We're going to have a mini camp here in East Rutherford a week from Thursday. I'm sorry, a week from Friday it starts. So we'll get our first look at all these guys, and I'm sure we'll get to talk to them. And I'm very much looking forward to getting to know Kayvon Thibodeaux. Just seems like a really interesting young man, and
He is. He is. There are not a lot of Kayvon Thibodeau's in the world on the field or off the field. There are not that many guys who are, just that comfortable at such a young
yeah,
age. I mean, you have to remember he's
21.
21.
Yeah,
Yeah, he's 21 years
but he
old.
act, but he's like a guy who's twice that age. The
Yeah, yeah.
maturity.
He looks so ready for the moment that is in front of him, and I think that's a really rare thing to see in somebody that age, no matter what position they are. I mean, I work in broadcast media now, but when I was 21, I don't know if I would have been comfortable, doing the number of things that I do now because it's just, and he's got 50,000 times the attention, that I've ever had to deal with. And so I was just trying to conceptualize the other day, like, man, like what would it be like? How would I react? I would like to think I'd react a certain way, but I don't really know. We all would like to think we'd run into the burning building to save somebody, But until you see an actual house that's on fire in front of you, you don't know how you're going to react. And he clearly does and is definitely ready for the moment. And I can't wait to watch him on Sundays.
Well, I know when I was 21, I was kind of scared of my own shadow. So as I got older, I got the confidence, and I'm still, every day, you grow a little more in
Yeah,
that
exactly.
area. So if he's this mature at 21, can you imagine what he's going to be 4 years from now when he's ready for that next contract? So
Yeah.
really
Yep.
exciting player. Listen, Spencer, thank you so much for
Of course.
coming on with me, telling me all this stuff. I mean, I'm just even more excited, and I think the listeners of the Locked On Giants podcast are going to be more excited the more they hear about him. The spotlight's going to be on him for sure
Yep.
when he shows up, and it's going to be interesting him going against Evan Neal. They're kind of
Yeah,
opposites in personalities.
those two in practice.
Yeah, it could be fun.
I'd like to see that. That'd
They
be
should sell tickets for
yeah.
that.
Yeah, I think people would pay to watch those two in practice, and every time Thibodeaux wins, there'd be a consortium of Giants fans. Oh, Evan Neal is terrible, or Kayvon Thibodeaux. Kayvon Thibodeaux doesn't get the quarterback. Oh my gosh, the critics were right.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
That'd be fun. But
It's
hey,
gonna
yeah,
be awesome.
happy to come on and talk about a future pro duck. Sadly, the only Oregon player drafted this year, and everybody else was an
Amazing
undrafted free
too.
agent.
Yeah,
Yeah, but
amazing that happened. But
yeah, I know that was a little unexpected, but you know what? That's all right. And Thibodeaux is definitely going to be someone who Oregon fans continue to follow, of which there are several in the NFL. So Giants fans should expect some loose crossover with Oregon Duck fans in the future when once Thibodeaux starts playing on Sundays.
well, I know that Oregon Duck fans are welcome to check out Locked On Giants. We'll have everything you need to know about not just him, but all the Giant players. We also have Shane Lemieux, a former Duck, as well on the
Yeah,
team
that's
too.
right. One of
Yeah,
Mario's offensive linemen. He's been
yeah,
great. Oh my gosh. And
yeah.
any Oregon fan who watched him play knows he was a 3 or 4 year starter and just so solid. Every guy
Yeah.
that Cristobal coached on the offensive line was really, really good. And I was really, really pleasantly surprised to see that he got a chance to play because I think that he is capable of being a nice player. I imagine Giants fans are pretty pleased with him.
Well, he was injured last year. He missed most of all the season actually with a knee injury, but he's a guy you don't count out. I mean, he's a tough guy. He
Yeah.
played guard for them. I think he also cross trained at center. So I think there's stuff in his future. Maybe not right away, but I could see. I don't think we've seen the last of Shane Lemieux. He's a
No,
tough
I
dude.
wouldn't imagine that. I wouldn't imagine that you have.
All right,
Um,
Giant fans, that is going to do it for us on today's Locked On Giants podcast. Make sure you keep it here all week long. We have other Locked On college hosts coming on to talk about the Giants draft picks. We're going to have Rick Saratella come on. Coach Dean Clemens is going to be on. We've got David Turner's going to be back for a return visit. So many people are coming on. I've got such a list of interviews for you. So let's keep it here, Locked On Giants. Thank you for making us your first listen of the day, or if watching on YouTube, your first watch of the day. We'll catch you tomorrow, Giant fans.